Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2000 Ford F450 with a 7.3 diesel. The customer complaint on this truck is the HVAC system is stuck on defrost, and the customer also stated that the wipers do not work. When he presses the wiper button, nothing happens. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, we're going to talk about what directions we're going to go so we can fix these issues that this truck has. I'm going to turn the key on. So as you can see, the key is on. So now let's try to turn on the wipers. So I press this button. So I'm pressing this button here. As you can see, our wipers don't come on. So customer's complaint confirmed. Okay, if everything were fine, when I press this button, our wipers were gonna come on. Okay, so the wipers were gonna come on and our windshield washer fluid was gonna shoot out also. Okay, and the windshield washer fluid is part of the wiper system. So whatever that's affecting the wipers is also affecting the windshield washer system. Okay, so no wipers. We have confirmed that. We have a problem here. So now let's check the HVAC system. So the HVAC system is stuck on defrost. So now we're gonna turn this on. So this is our mode knob. So I'm gonna turn our mode knob to vent. Okay, so when we turn this over here, the air should be coming out of these vents. Okay, so we are not on defrost right now. So let's increase the fan speed. I hope you can hear this. Now, instead of the air coming out of these vents, it's actually coming out of the defrost opening over here. Okay, so this is the problem. Customer's complaint confirmed. Okay, so let me grab a piece of paper so I can show you. Okay, so as you can see, this is not being blown, but when I put it over here, you see how it's being blown over here? Let me put this over here. See that? I hope you can tell. Okay, you see how it's being blown up? Yeah, you see that? Okay, so we are stuck on defrost. Right now, we are on the vent setting. Okay, air should be coming out of these vents, but it's not. Okay, so let's go to our feet. We're gonna direct the air down here. I cannot feel it down here. It's still coming out of defrost. Okay, so once again, customer's complaint confirmed. So I'm going to turn this off. Now, what's the problem? Let me turn the key off. I'm going to start by diagnosing the HVAC system first, because that's pretty easy on these trucks. This truck is pretty old. It's about 23 years old. So the HVAC system on these trucks were vacuum operated. The actuators under the dash are actuators that work with vacuum. Okay, now the HVAC system being stuck on defrost is usually a fault strategy. I mean, a default strategy, if you can call it like that. So basically, it's when you have a problem in the system goes into that fault mode and it only allows the air to go through the defrost route. Okay, it only routes the air to the windshield so that the truck can be driven to a shop. Okay, because if this was to happen in the winter, if your air was stuck to your feet or to your vents, it's going to be hard for you to get it on defrost to drive around. So this is why the manufacturers make the default strategy, allow the air to go to the windshield to allow the driver to at least be able to drive the truck. So I believe there's a problem. I mean, yes, there is. There is a problem on the HVAC system. We need to figure out why. Now, since the actuators under the dash are vacuum operated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for vacuum going under the dash first. Because we could have a vacuum line that's disconnected, we could have a vacuum supply issue. So let's make sure that we're getting vacuum under the dash first, and then we will continue with our diagnosis process. Let's check that first, and then we're gonna check the wipers system afterwards. Now let's go under the hood so we can check for our vacuum supply to the dash. Here is our vacuum pump. Okay, so this over here is our vacuum pump. So this line, if you follow this line, it goes under the dash. So this is our vacuum line that supplies vacuum to the actuators under the dash. Okay. Now what we need to do is we have to make sure that we have vacuum coming out of this vacuum pump. Okay. So I am going to get a vacuum gauge. We're gonna connect our vacuum gauge to this line over here that comes from the vacuum pump, and then we're going to start the truck to see if we have vacuum coming out of this pump, because this pump has to supply vacuum to the system so that our HVAC system can work properly. And this over here is a vacuum reservoir. Okay, so vacuum comes out of this pump. So this pump produces vacuum, and then it goes to the reservoir, and then the reservoir sends it into the dash, okay, and the other actuators that need vacuum under the hood. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a vacuum gauge so we can test this pump. I'm going to disconnect the supply line coming from our vacuum pump. So I'm gonna disconnect this line over here. Okay, so this line supplies vacuum to the vacuum tank. So now I'm gonna connect our vacuum gauge to the supply line coming from the vacuum pump. All right, so as you can see, I have my supply line of the vacuum pump connected to the vacuum gauge. So now let's go in the vehicle and start the engine. If this vacuum pump is working, we should have a vacuum reading on this gauge while the engine is running. And with the engine running, our reading should be between 25 and 30 inches of vacuum. So now let's go in the vehicle and start the engine. So this is a manual transmission. I had to push the clutch down to start the truck. So right here, as you can see, our vacuum gauge is reading 0 inches of vacuum. So there's no vacuum coming out of this pump. Okay, so the engine is off and there's no vacuum on this gauge. So our vacuum pump is not working. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine so I can tell you what we're gonna do next. Okay, there's no vacuum coming out of this pump. So now let's go in the truck and turn off the engine. So there's no vacuum coming out of this pump. Okay, now the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have a bad vacuum pump, or do we have a bad wiring of the vacuum pump? Because this is an electric vacuum pump. Okay, so this is why our HVAC system is stuck on defrost, because there is no vacuum going to the dash. All right, so this is our problem over here. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna check the wiring of the vacuum pump. I'm gonna grab a test light so we can back probe these two wires. So this is a 2-wire electrical connector. When the truck is running, this vacuum pump receives power and ground to supply vacuum to the dash and the other actuators that need vacuum to operate. Okay, so since we have 2 wires at this electrical connector, when I back probe these 2 wires here, let me disconnect this. So here is the electrical connector of the vacuum the vacuum pump. I'm going to back probe these 2 wires. We're going to use a test light to bypass the vacuum pump. With the engine running, we should have power and ground at these 2 wires. I didn't look up the wiring diagram, so I don't know which wire is what. I don't know if this one is ground and this one is the control. So there is a black wire and a blue wire with a purple tracer. So I'm assuming the black wire is the ground and then the purple wire is the control of the vacuum pump. I'm gonna get a test light. We're gonna back probe these 2 wires and bypass this pump with the test light. With the truck running, if the wiring is good, the test light should be on. If the test light comes on with the truck running while we back probe these 2 wires, that will tell me that the wiring of the vacuum pump is good. At that point, the problem is going to be a defective vacuum pump. Because if we have power and ground at these 2 wires, the vacuum pump should run. And since it's not running, the problem should be the pump if we have good power and good ground at the wiring. So I'm going to grab a test light so we can back probe these 2 wires. Let's make sure that our test light is good. So I'm going to touch these 2 terminals on the battery. So right there, I hope you can see the test light that comes on. So our test light is good. So now I'm going to back probe these 2 wires. Okay, and then I'm gonna connect my test light to these 2 back probing tools. Now I can reconnect the electrical connector. Now we have to make sure that our back probing tools don't touch each other. Okay, and then I'm just gonna put my test light right here. So now let's go in the truck and start the engine. So as you can hear, the truck is running. I hope you can see our test light is on. Okay, test light is connected to the vacuum pump's electrical connector. Our test light is on and our gauge over here is still showing 0. Okay, we have 0 inches of vacuum coming out of this vacuum pump. Okay, so the wiring of the pump is good. Because the test light comes on, the pump is still not working, so the problem is a defective vacuum pump. We have to replace this pump. Okay, so we are done, guys. We're done with our diagnosis on this HVAC system that's stuck on defrost. The problem is a defective vacuum pump. So now I'm gonna go in the truck and turn off the engine. So as you can see, our test light is on. Wiring is good, bad, electric vacuum pump. So now I'm gonna go in the truck and turn off the engine. So let's turn off the truck. Our wiring of the vacuum pump is good. Okay, we saw that the test light was on when the truck was running, so our vacuum pump is receiving good power and good ground. And since it's not coming on and it's not producing vacuum, that means the pump is bad. Okay, so we got the test light out of the way. I'm gonna disconnect the electrical connector. We can disconnect the gauge from this tube. Okay, our vacuum gauge can get out of the way. So now we're gonna remove this pump. Okay, so we can get this pump out and then we're gonna replace it. And I'm sure after we replace this vacuum pump, our HVAC system won't be stuck on defrost anymore. So before I remove this pump, I'm going to call my local parts store and get a new pump. Once I get a new pump, I'll bring you guys back up so we can replace this pump and get the HVAC system fixed. And after that, we're going to move on with the wiper system. I'm going to get this pump and then I'll bring you guys back up. So a couple of hours later, I received a new vacuum pump from my local parts store. Here is the part number. So I'm gonna get our new vacuum pump out of the box. So here is the vacuum pump that we're gonna install. Okay. So after we install this vacuum pump, we should be good to go. Okay. And we're gonna test this vacuum supply to this tank. With the engine running, we should have vacuum coming out of this tube. So now we're gonna remove our old vacuum pump. So we're gonna pull this pump up just like that. So here comes our old vacuum pump. Okay, so it has this rubber grommets that go down here on this bracket. Okay, so we're gonna remove this tube over here. Okay, and then we're going to install this tube on our new vacuum pump, just like that. And then we're gonna install our new pump. We have to make sure that our rubber grommets line up, and then we're just gonna push it down. So I'm just basically gonna push the whole pump down. So now I'm going to connect the electrical connector to our new vacuum pump. Now, before we connect this tube to the vacuum tank, I'm going to connect our vacuum gauge to the supply line coming from our new vacuum pump. So the new vacuum pump should be sending out some vacuum into the reservoir. And if this new pump is good, and if we did the right diagnosis, now when we start the truck, we should now have a vacuum reading on this gauge. Remember, before we didn't have a vacuum reading on the gauge with this old vacuum pump on the truck. Okay, so we know this is bad. Now let's confirm that we made the right call before we connect this line to the vacuum reservoir. Okay, so now I'm gonna go in the vehicle and start the truck. Let's see if we now gonna have a vacuum reading on the gauge. All right, so the truck is running and our gauge is still showing 0 inches of vacuum. Wow, what the heck? Now the question is, did we get a bad pump out of the box? Now let me make sure we still have good power and good ground at the pump. I'm gonna grab my test light. Let's check our power and ground at the pump once again. Let's make sure that our test light, let's make sure that we're getting good power and good ground at the pump. So right there, as you can see, our pump is still receiving good power and good ground. So the pump should be working right now, okay? So the wiring of the pump is definitely good. So right there, our test lights. So we have good power and good ground at the pump, and the pump is still not putting out enough vacuum. So there's zero vacuum coming out of this new pump. So this pump is bad. Okay. Ah, dang it. So we just got a defective pump out of the box. I'm gonna go in the truck and turn off the engine. Wow. This is very unfortunate, you know. You order a new part, you get a new part, it comes in, but it's bad out of the box. So, I mean, we have good power and good ground at the pump, but the pump is not putting out any vacuum. Okay, what's the problem? Well, bad part out of the box. Ah, freaking Napa. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to call the Ford dealership. I don't know if Ford still sells these vacuum pumps. I mean, this truck is pretty old, so I don't know if I can get an OEM vacuum pump, because I mean, you cannot go wrong going OEM. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call the Ford dealership and see if I can get this vacuum pump. Hopefully I can get it from the OEM, but if I cannot get the OEM one, I'll call my Napa guys and see if they have a better quality than this one. Ah, that's a bummer. Well, in the meantime, we can actually continue and check our wiper system, because the wipers are not working. So we already know that the wiring of the pump is good. So we're gonna get a different pump and install it, and after that we're gonna be good. So we got a bad pump out of the box. Now I'm gonna continue with the wiper system, and then when we get the correct and good pump, we're going to install it, and I'm sure after that this is gonna be fixed. So moving on. Actually, I can just remove this and I can pull this out, you know. Let me just remove this because it's bad. Okay, so here is our new bad pump. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on the wiper system. Let's figure out why the wiper motor is not working. I called the Ford dealership off camera. They told me that they still stock these electric vacuum pumps. So that's a good news. We're gonna get an OEM electric pump. Once we get an OEM electric vacuum pump, our HVAC system will be fixed, okay? Now, before we go to the truck and diagnose the wiper system, I'm going to print out the wiring diagram of the wiper system so that we can familiarize ourselves with how this system is wired, and then we're gonna develop a plan of attack. I'm gonna print out the wiring diagram and then I'll bring you guys back up. Here is our wiper system wiring diagram. This is our multifunction switch. As you can see over here, it says multifunction switch. This is the wiper motor switch, and this over here is the generic electronic module. So this module energizes the relay that energizes the wiper motor, okay? So the way this works is when we press the wiper switch, this arm over here closes, okay? This here closes. Then there is a signal sent to this module, and then this module controls this relay, okay? This coil over here gets energized, and then this switch closes, and then power flows from this circuit, okay, down to the motor, and then the motor comes on and the wipers start working, okay? So this is a pretty straightforward circuit. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that our relays are getting power, okay? So if you look over here, we have two relays. I hope you can see right here. We have a wiper high/low relay, and then we have a wiper run/park relay. Okay, so there is a fuse over here, fuse 11, okay? And this fuse is in the central junction box. This box is under the dash, so fuse 11. What we can do is we can go to this fuse and check the fuse first to make sure that the fuse is good. Or we can go to this relay and check for 2 powers at the relay, okay? So all these relays over here should have 2 powers, okay? So pin 1 over here should have power. You see this wire? It should have power because it's coming from this fuse. Okay, and then this other wire over here, this wire should actually have power when this switch closes over here. Okay, now we can actually check this relay first, okay, because our washer pump is also not working. Okay, and I'm sure if we fix the washer pump circuit, our wiper circuit will be fixed as well. So whatever that's causing the wiper motor to not work, I believe it's the same problem that's causing the washer pump to not work as well. Okay, so we can pick whatever circuit we can focus on first, and then once we fix that, I'm sure it's gonna affect the other one as well. So now what I'm gonna do is I am going to go to this relay. Okay, let's just pick one relay. We can pick this one or this one, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna pick this relay. I'm gonna pick the wiper run/park relay. I hope you can see there. So this relay is going to have 2 powers, okay? And then when this coil gets energized, okay, this arm moves over here. We're gonna have power flowing from this leg of the circuit through this red wire, and then through this arm and down this white wire and to the motor. Since the motor is grounded over here, then the motor is gonna run, okay? So I'm not gonna go in the vehicle and check these fuses yet. Getting to the relay is really easy. I'm gonna get to the relay and check for 2 powers. If I have 2 powers here, that will tell me that this fuse over here is good. And then I can actually send power down this pin to see if my motor is going to run. If the motor runs, that will tell us that this side of the circuit is good. Okay, the motor and this side of the circuit is good. Then at that point, we're going to focus on the control side of the relay. Okay, so let's get to this relay and do some tests. Let's make sure we have 2 powers at the relay, and then we're going to send power down pin 3 over here to see if our motor is going to run. Okay, so now let's go under the hood and do that. When I send power down this test lead, our wipers work. Watch that. Can you guys see the wipers? I hope you can see the wipers there. So I'm jumping this. Watch that.